Welcome everybody to today's webinar. Um, what I want to cover today is a few of the menus that probably Ultimax users or people who have come over from Ultimax might be familiar with, but there are some things underneath these menus that might be helpful for new users as well on WinMax. So I want to cover the import-export functions menus, copy and change blocks, and then I want to talk a little bit about using STL files, importing them in, or creating them from the software to use as stock geometry for secondary operations, castings, and things like that. During the webinar, if you have any questions that pop up that you can think of in the chat menu or the little chat bubble, please feel free to type something in there. I'll go through those at the end and read those questions out loud and try to answer those to see if we can help anybody else who might have any questions. Also, today's webinar is being recorded, so everyone should get a link to download the recorded version of this, and it'll be on our website as well. So the first thing I want to cover is the import-export function. So both of these menus I want to talk about are going to be off of the input screen. And the first one is the import-export functions. I'm going to skip the first one for now, the import from a conversational file, because there's a little more to that one, and I'll come back and talk about it, but we'll talk about the others. So importing and exporting an NC state file. If you do not have a library associated with your machine, then when you create tools in a program, conversationally, those tools are saved with the program. And we'll talk about how I can bring those in from something else in a minute. But if I create tools in a G-code program, then my G54 through 59, all my tools, those are separated from the conversational side, and those are all stored in what we call an NC state file. So from time to time, you may need to share that NC states file either with someone who's trying to help you with a problem here at Hurco, service personnel, you might have to share it between machines or whatever, but you can click on the import and export files here to export it out to a thumb drive or to a file somewhere on the on your network, and then import that from that same location. So the NC states file, nothing really to show you there. I just wanted you to be aware that if you do not have the library, your conversational and your G-code tool lists will not match. If you have the library, then those tool numbers, those tool descriptions, they will be exactly the same for conversational or NC. We also have the import and export tool library. So if you do have the tool library on your machine, you have the library of tools that are shared with NC and conversational. You also have a database of material and speeds and feeds and things that are used if you determine what kind of material that particular program is using and so forth. And we have a lot of different options here to export and import those things from the tool library as well. So I can export all auto and manual tools. Basically, everything will export. I can do just the manual tool list. I can append to a tool list, which means whatever I'm appending in from. So this would be bringing in this file from another location, like a thumb drive or something. It's going to just add them to the end of whatever library I already have. And that is in addition to or different from merge tools in. Merging the tools will use the same tool numbers that are in the file that you're merging in, and it will sort of place those in order, if you will, in the library. Same thing goes for the tool and material database. So as I said, you can create a list of speeds and feeds based on materials and a list of materials that can be used in programs, and I can export those as well. So that's kind of the import export functions there, the NC states file and so forth. Now the import from conversational file, this is one I want to talk about a little bit. If you don't have the library on your machine, whether it be WinMax or Ultimax, and you create a new program, you're fully aware that you don't have any tools that show up in your library. second. Someone's unmuted. Let me mute. Okay, so you're aware that you don't have any tools in that library, and you would have to create those tools for that particular program. And a lot of times people who don't get the library, that's fine because they never use the same tools over and over anyway. They often change them, and that's why they probably don't spend the money to get the library. But if you do want to use tools that were in another program or that you've just finished using in a program, we have a couple of different ways to handle that. One of them is I can import from a conversational file. So let's say I go out and find a program that I have saved on my desktop. On my desktop. I highlight that and I hit import. Well, now I have the ability to bring in any of these things that are listed here, either all of them or some of them if I need to. And those will be imported into whatever program happens to be open at the time. So if I have just ran a program, saved it off on my desktop or saved it on the computer somewhere, the control, and I've started a new program and I want to use the same tool list and the same part setup that I just used on that previous one, well, then I can just uncheck the things that I don't want, click begin operation, and it would then import my part setup and all the tools into the program. There's another option that we can do as well, and that would be to simply take the program that I'm running, and this is for people who don't have the library. Let's say that I've run a program. It's the one that I have on the screen, and this tool list that's in there is the same tool list that I want to use on the next round of parts, either all or part of these tools. They're already touched off, they're ready to go, and my part setup is something that I want to keep. Well, there are two things that people will do in that case. They will either create a program called tools, or they would basically create all of the tool list that they're going to use for their machine and then import those into an active program whenever they need to. And that works really well by starting a new program and importing in just the things that I need from a conversational program. However, where that kind of falls apart is if you have made changes. Let's say that you started this job on first shift and you ran all day. Second shift comes in, they're running the same program, but one of the drills break, and they retouch off that tool, and they go ahead and they run the rest of the job out. You come in next morning, you don't know that they did that. You go import from, and they didn't save back to your tool list program. Next morning, you come in, you use the tool list program, and now your drill that was there yesterday is no longer the same. So that's one way we see import from a conversational used a lot. But one way around that, and what most people end up doing in that case, is they would save off, let's say we go to this intro 5 here, they would save this program as whatever the next job they're going to run. So let's say it's an intro 6. Save that out. Now the job they were using has been protected. We saved it before we did this. Now we've saved off as a new job, and we can simply go in and delete just the blocks from this program, which would leave the tool list that was in there and our part setup. So the tools that were saved with the program would still be there. They didn't show up here because this has the library and this little box was checked. But anyway, that's one way to get around not having a library and using the import from a conversational program. Most people we sell to today, they use they purchase a library, so that's not something that gets happened often, but I have used this a lot for bringing in part setups from other conversational programs where I don't have to write them down and retype them in, things like that. So that kind of covers the import-export functions. There are some useful things in there. but there are also different ways to get around that now with new features like the library. The next one I want to talk about is the copy and change blocks. Now this one I found most people aren't aware of this, and those, let me open a program that has something in it. Those who are aware of the copy and change blocks are mostly Ultimax users or users who came over from Ultimax, and they're going to use these first three buttons to do things like, I want to copy block 5 and 6 and then place that before the end of the program or before a specific block in the program. I would put my range of blocks that I want to copy, where I wanted to place them in the program, and I would click the F5 make the change button. Same with moving and deleting blocks. You get the same range of start and end, put before, make the change, things like that. Well, if you're a WinMax user, you probably do all of this under the review screen here, where I have cut, copy, paste, delete, things like that. So, but I still find a lot of people who were doing it in Ultimax, they're used to it and they continue to do it here as well. But these last four down here are the ones that I really want to talk about. These are, a lot of people aren't aware that they're here and they can be very useful. One of them that I use from time to time is modify dimensions. If I click on that, I get the start and end block range in the program. Well, let's say in this particular program that I've got here, for some reason, I need to add 10 or 15 thousandths depth to a range of programmed blocks in here. And I don't want to have to go in and literally go to block 5, block 6, block 7, block 8, and add that value in there. Well, I can do that as a global change here by hitting modify dimensions. Hold on, somebody. So I can hit modify dimensions. I could pick starting at block 5, ending at block 10, for example. And then I can put either an X, a Y, or a Z value in here. In my example, I need to go 15 thousandths deeper in the Z. I would put that in here. Since it's in the Z, it's going to ask you, do you want to make this change in the Z start? Yes or no? That way, if my Z start was at 0.1 and I change this to yes, then it would change my Z start to 15 thousandths less than that. Typically, I won't want to do that. But anyway, I would put whatever shift values I want to do in here, and then I would hit make the change. And that would automatically add 15 thousandths negative depth to those blocks. So that's a pretty handy one that people may or may not be aware of. And these other two have to do with changing speeds and feeds, either by tool or by everything. So change all feed speeds and tools. I've used this one quite a bit when I forget to put a plunge feed in a range of blocks. So I can go here, start at the beginning of the program, go to the end of the program, type in a plunge feed, 10 inches a minute, and then hit make the change, and then it would make that change on all those locations. I can also do the same thing for an RPM, feed rate, use different tools, a new tool to be used in a specific block for rough or finish. I have the same here for change feeds and speeds by tool. I've used this one quite a bit. So I want to take a tool number 10, and it says, if you look down here, the changes will be made only to the blocks that use this tool. So if I were to put a tool number in here and then give a new RPM, a new feed rate, new plunge, or whatever, it would then change those only in the blocks that use that. So again, another good way to make a global change. And the last one here out of these blocks is the change surface finish quality. So if my roughing or finishing tool, if I need to change the SFQ for some reason, then I can do that globally here as well. These are handled with default values from the program parameters, or you can go into each individual block and make these changes there. But this is a way to do it after the fact if you wanted to change it after I run my first part and I want to make some changes. Again, range of blocks, whether or not you want to change the roughing or the finish, what do you want to change it to, and then hit make the change. So that kind of covers those. Sorry, I had something distracted me. So that's kind of the copy and change blocks and import export functions. Not very difficult. Once you get in there and you're aware that they're there, you'll find things that might be helpful to you. At least you know that that's a way you can handle that if you need to. Again, modify dimensions for the Z and changing speeds and feeds, mainly my plunge feed. I've used those a lot since I found out those were there. So just wanted to point those out. So the other thing I wanted to talk about today was something that a lot of people aren't aware of, and that is we can use STL files as stock geometry. So in this example that I have here, I've got a bunch of angled holes coming in from a flat surface. They're perpendicular to a flat surface that's on an angle in a part that would have probably been done on a 5-axis machine. Now, when we usually do stock geometry, let's go do that. Or let's open something different. Typically, I can say that I want to use a box or a cylinder, and that's what most people are using. Pretty early on in version 9, I don't believe it was in version 8, but if you have a version 9 machine or newer, WinMax, this STL file option should show up. It's free. It's nothing that you had to purchase. It's not an option. It's just part of the system. And a lot of times, a box or cylinder just won't work. And we find that on castings, secondary work, where I've already flipped the part over after I've already done it from a box or just a square rectangular piece of material, and now it doesn't look like that anymore. So there's a couple ways we can use this STL file. So first of all, if I select it, it's going to give me a question down here for whether or not to use the program name. If you answer, leave it at yes, it's going to look in the same folder for an STL file with the exact same name as the program. I always answer no, which then gives me the ability to click on there, select STL file, and I can go browse to find whatever STL file it is that I'm going to use. And that's how I've done the one that I just showed you. So if we go to this angled bushing, more stock geometry, and you can see that I have an STL file, answered no, and I went and I found that. Now, that's going to use whatever 0 point was on the STL file when it was brought in, and it's going to use the orientation, meaning positive X, Y, and Z are going to be whatever was on that STL when I brought that in. I have no way of manipulating this, changing it location very drastically from here. I can use these values here. Let's go down -1 inch. And you can see that it did shift my STL file, and I was able to bring it down. I can move it in X and Y, but that's not usually what it is that we need to do. So let me take that back to, now let's just open a different file here. So I'm going to open a new program. I'm going to open Intro 5 again. All right, so on this Intro 5 program, it's very simple. I'm just doing a frame with a circle and another frame all the way through the part. Turn this on just solids. So let's say this was our operation 1. I have a couple of things I can do. I can actually, if this is a part that is a casting, then I can just reposition the STL file in my CAM system. I can export it, bring it in here, and use it for my secondary operations. But if this is a conversational program that I wrote from a napkin sketch, if you will, for something that I really don't have a solid model for, I've got a print or a sketch that I drew up, and now I need to create an STL file that I can use for my secondary operation, I can do that right from the control. So while the graphics is up for the operation 1, I'm going to hit the settings button down here in the bottom right. Now this is another thing that is in the older graphics as well. I don't remember the keystrokes, but it's under settings. You would have to go find where you can do the save STL. But under settings, this is on the Max 5. Right here on we have 3 tabs on graphic settings. So we're on the display settings, the far left one. We have a simulation save button. If I click on save, it defaults to simulation. That is helpful if you have a really long graphics that has to draw before you're able to use your runtime tool. You can save this simulation out, load that, and then when you hit auto and you want to run enable your runtime tool, the tool that shows what it's doing real time, it doesn't have to draw first. But what we're going to do is we're going to pull this menu down to save STL file. I'm going to put it on my desktop. I'm going to leave it at the program name, and I'm going to hit save. And what you'll notice is it automatically starts running the graphics internally, and then it crashes your software. All right. So what that was doing, guys, and I did this several times playing around with it before I got on the webinar. So apparently I have got my computer out of memory here. But what would have happened is it saves it onto our desktop, and then we can import in from the desktop. See if we can find it here. And here is the file right here in the middle. It saved it as intro 5. That is an STL file. And I would then be able to bring that in and use it as stock geometry. So what I can't do, and what I was going to show you, but I'm going to have to reboot before my software will come back up, I believe. I'll try it here. But is you would have to then take that to a CAM system or something to flip the part over. Because if I had saved it in the orientation that it was still just like it looked on the graphics. And Z positive, the top of the part, was the top of the part that was in that particular program. If I'm going to do secondary operations, I'm going to want to flip that over, so I would have to do that offline. We have requested ways to do that in the software, and someday we will be able to do that in graphics, but right now we cannot. So you would have to take that off to Mastercam or something and flip it, save it, and bring it back in. But at least you didn't have to draw the geometry and create everything. The control did that for you. Now, the only other thing that you have to be aware of is when you export your STL file from your CAM system. Not in the case of this, because I created it from WinMax, but in the case of my little capsule looking thing that I had in my first example, then you would have to make sure you export that from your CAM system in metric. You can use it in the WinMax software or on the control in inch, it doesn't matter, but for some reason they must be exported in metric. Now, there's also, on our YouTube channel, the Hurco company's YouTube channel, I have a video that explains that as well. And you can go look that up, and it'll talk a little more about that. And that's not really apparently a Hurco thing. That just has to do with the way STL files are. When they just need that. They need that metric unit of measure first, I guess. I'm not sure why, but anyway. So I apologize for the software again without rebooting my computer, which is going to end this webinar. I won't be able to show you any more of that, but let's see if this comes up. Yeah, it won't let me do anything. But hopefully before it crashed, I was able to give you a few things that were helpful to you. I'm going to look over in the chat menu here and see. I'm reading, let's see. Is there a way to change? Oh, okay. So the question is asking whether or not we can change an X start or a Y start in a program using the modified dimensions. And the answer would be no. What I can do is I can add to or subtract, go positive or negative value in X or in Y or in Z, but it's going to move both the starting point and the end point of whatever it is that I added or subtracted from there in that modified dimensions menu. So I believe that's what that question was. And again, the answer is no. I don't have any way to just start or the starting point or the ending point of a line, for example. And it's for the entire block. So if I picked a range of blocks and I added 10 thousandths positive in X, it would move every X dimension in those blocks by 10 thousandths. Okay, that's the only question they got typed in here. Anybody else have anything? I'll wait a minute or two here before we end this. But again, I apologize for the software. It just didn't want to behave today. When we're doing things with the STL files, especially on a desktop, we're using lots of memory, and mine ran out of memory or whatever from doing it all over and over again today, playing with it. All right, well, I don't see any other new questions being added, so I guess we'll go ahead and end the recording for today.